Good morning. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hampton Bays Water District Commissioners on this 8th day of October 2020. Please rise if you're able and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Supervisor Schneiderman?
Here.
Councilwoman Lofstad?
Here.
Councilman Martell?
Here.
Councilman Bouvier?
Here.
Councilman Stevens?
Here.
All right, thank you. We do this twice a year, biannual meetings of the Hampton Bays Water District. One of the many hats we wear is the town board, we're commissioners of various special districts, including a water district. All of Hampton Bays is provided water through the Hampton Bays Water District, and we are joined by our able management over there. We have both Richard McEwen and James Cappers, who have been working together very well, making sure that people have good pressure, clean water, safe water, and trying to address whatever issues and provide a high level of service to the customers over there. So we have a couple items to discuss here. We're going to talk about operations. We're going to talk about capital projects. We're going to talk about the GAC filters and the carbon that needs to be changed. We're going to get an update on changes to the sanitary code regarding perfluorinated compounds, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the high volume of water that was used this prolonged summer season, and we'll talk about general customer satisfaction and anything else that the board or the water district wants to discuss. So who would like to come up of the two of you to the podium? You can trade back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to say that, this has been a very long pandemic for all of us.
That's for sure.
And, we certainly appreciate you guys continuing to deliver service through it. I know you have to respond to customers. I know you have to check meters. I know that you have to be out there in the field fixing water main breaks and all those other things. So thank you for keeping things going through a really challenging time. And, I have to say, because it's been very busy at this end too. My phone has not been busy with water district stuff. I barely ever get a call anymore, which is really, really good news. So whatever you're doing there is keeping people satisfied, keeping people happy. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
After we had a lot of issues 2 summers ago with discolored water, we had health concerns, we had pressure concerns. We've been taking steps to address all those things.
Correct.
All those things, and it seems to be working. So let's, if you want to say anything as like an opening remark.
Yeah, this follow up from our last meeting, which was back in May. We had a few topics that we discussed that were going to happen from May till now. A couple things were that we talked about that big meter being changed out, the 8-inch meter at the atrium, and you guys wanted to know roughly the turnaround on the basically the cash register coming in. So I just have a little data I just wanted to explain. Last year, the big meter at the atrium, now that's the one that's the medical offices and Montauk Highway. It's the biggest meter we have. It's an 8-inch meter, and the meter that was there was roughly 30 to 40 years old. So it wasn't registering low flow. So that was on our list, mandatory to change that. So we're losing equity there. We're losing money coming into us. So last year in June, their consumption was 3,152 cubic feet, and for a total bill of $361. Now we changed the meter out in May of this year. So from May to June, their consumption went up 70,200 cubic feet, and their bill was $1,362. That's in 1 month use. Now, from June to September, their bill was, consumption was 258,900 cubic feet for a bill of $4,614.
It's a
So
big
there,
difference.
from June to September, we paid for that meter.
Great.
So if we project from September till next June, we should pay for the total cost of the installation, and then thereafter will be all positive income.
That's great.
And that's spread out over how many tenants in the atrium? Right?
There's the dialysis center. There's so many different medical buildings within that unit.
Right.
Plus
Do you
the
have an
sprinkler
idea of how
system that they
many?
use.
That is rough.
There's the A and B, and each one has up to, I think they go to F and G units. So rightfully so, A1, B2, you know.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It
a lot.
is a lot.
And we
Yeah,
also
just curious
changed-
as to-
Did we change the billing based on volume as well?
Yes, that was my next thing, is that we also did the billing on volume, the first 700 cubic feet, and therefore thereafter. So that does have a lot to do with this income, but also was as you can tell, is the consumption. The consumption went up from last September was 88,000 to now it's recording 258,000. So it's
Big
recording low flow from the littlest drop to the biggest demand on the system, which the older meter wasn't. Just to bring on that is that next year we plan on replacing the Hampton Bays Apartments, which is the next biggest meter. It's a 6-inch meter. That one is again roughly 20 to 30 years old, end of lifetime. So we should see a good jump again. We're not going to hopefully not lose any more equity through that meter, and we'll start recouping the cost of that.
That's good.
So that was one thing. The other thing was that we rehabbed 2-1. We talked about that in May, that 2-1 was pulling sand. They found a lot of
When
issues.
This is a well.
Well, 2-1 on Overhead Road. Part of our rehab program, when they did the pump test, they found that this one was pulling sand and not meeting capacity. So we went ahead and rehabbed that well. Everything, the well ran flawlessly throughout the demand of the season. Next year we plan on doing 3-1, which we talked about. Was the next one on the list that's not pumping as efficient as it should be. So it's simple as probably just cleaning the screens off and then putting the well casing back in. But this one was a new motor, new casing, new column, new screen, new bedding, and everything. It's a total overhaul.
We subbed that out, that's Delta?
That's
or-
Delta Well covers that. That's part underneath one of our contracts.
And do you have the before and after, pump rate?
We won't know the pump data till next year when we do the pumpage report. Every year we do a pumpage report for each well.
Okay,
But this one was, the pump rate was fine, but the problem was it was pulling sand into the, going into the system. So the column actually had a hole in it. And that was from the vibration because it's a submersible well. It's not one of the turbine with the motors on top, it comes from the bottom. And this one was kind of on an angle, so what happened was the motor was sitting on the column, and then the vibration over time wore a hole in it.
okay, so it's pulling sand
So
in,
pulling a little bit of sand. Very, very, very small amounts, but
but that's all fixed.
that's all fixed and running flawlessly, and,
So
kept
now
up
we
with
have
demand.
we sort of have a system, a program
Yes,
for these because we have like 11 wells?
11 wells, yeah.
So basically one a year?
One a year, at least one a year, if we can manage two out of our contract with Delta. We do put in for.
So we're trying between 7 and 10 years, each well will have
At least once, yes, yeah.
We'll get cleaned at once.
Forefield, we might have to do earlier because of the iron situation. We might have to do every 5 to 7, depending upon, the pumpage report. But that, everyone should be able to go at least 10. Like the 5 field, which is our newest well, which is 2007, hasn't been touched since then, and it's been running perfectly fine. So that one, all depending on what type of water it's sitting in the aquifer. If it's, high iron, obviously we got to do more. But if, like the 5 field is running perfectly on our pumpage report, it will just be like a preventative maintenance put on it. Once it's up to its term, we're just going to pull it and look at it. If they have to do anything, they don't do anything. If they have to do something, then we'll be able to do something.
Okay.
And then just to talk about pumpage, just to lead into that, I know we're not going kind of in order what that says, but as we all know, this year exceeded our maximum year This is a record year so far, thus far. Just to give you a general idea, we have some numbers. June of 19, we had 132 million gallons of water pumped. June of 2020 was 175 million. July was 2019 was 192 million. July 2020, 2009. August was 187. August of 2020 was 196. September of 19, 155 million. And September 2020, so 163. So that was an increase just over a 4-month period of 77,280,000 gallons of water pumped. So it was a very demanding.
Do you have that as a percentage increase or no?
No, I don't. But that was a very demanding season. We didn't know or expect this to happen because of the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic played a good role with people coming out earlier to their summer homes, being home, maintaining their lawns, their property.
It's very dry this year.
Very dry this year.
But let me ask you something. When we have higher volume, that's when we run into lower pressure. That's when we run into discoloration. You know, as certain, you know, water moves in different. No, Janice, you need a pen. I have no pen. Thanks.
Oh, you want that too?
No, I don't need that. But I wasn't hearing, normally my phone starts to ring off the hook when those issues happen. So even though we were pumping more water than ever, which meant that there was more water usage,
Right.
people were using more water, we seem to have managed it in a way that didn't lead to the same problems with low pressure discoloration.
Yeah, that basically what that meant is that the pumps were running longer than usual. Also, we have the demand at the early morning, the irrigation system, showers, and all that stuff. That was pretty much the same. But usually by 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, our tanks are full, satisfied, pumps are shutting down more, and then we only have 2 or 3 running in the early evening to early afternoon, later evening. But this time, basically, all our wells were running pretty much stacked up, 24-hour period. Nothing really was able to shut off. You know, we had some wells being able to shut off, but it was just such a demand on the system in a 24-hour period, longer than it was in previous years, where it was only maybe like a 12 to 18-hour demand on the system, where the tanks were able to be able to get satisfied. But this way, this
Is
time.
there anything that you guys did differently this time that managed it better?
Well, what we did this year, just to help with the way the wells ran, our 5-field is a variable speed motor, so it can run off of pressure. So when it wouldn't try to pump water, so like basically our tank 2 is our controlling tank on Old Riverhead Road. So that basically would tell our wells when to turn on due to the elevation. So if elevation got to a point, a well would kick on until elevation was reached, the well would shut off. So we have so much water on the west side of town, we're always trying to funnel it east. And a lot of times what we'd do is we would have all the wells running on the west side of town, and it would create like a funnel action and create a pressure head, and the water wouldn't be able to get there, as sufficient as it would if we just let the wells on the east side of town do the work, let these wells kind of shut off. So we're not creating a funnel. If you think of a funnel this way and it's got a little hole on the bottom, you're trying to jam all this water into one main going east, it would create problems. So we actually ran 5-field off pressure this year. So when the pressure dropped to 55 pounds, the well would kick on. When it got to 70, the well would kick off. This way, it didn't create any over pressure to the system. It didn't stir up any water. We didn't have, like we were explaining, we had maybe a half a dozen dirty water complaints, which mostly 99% of them turned out to be internal. Filters,
Hot water heaters.
hot water heaters, a lot of that stuff. Leaky service lines, bringing in sand and stuff. So. Other than that, the pumps were just, with our rehab system and everything, the pumps ran flawlessly, so we didn't have any issues like 2018 where we had to shut 3 wells down. We didn't have, in the middle of
Right.
demand system, we didn't have any hiccups. So that's where we were able to keep the call volume down with any pressure problems, low water problems. So
Good. And I know you guys tried to do a voluntary,
yes.
odd even, program for irrigation system.
Yeah, we did the best we can. Like we said, we can't enforce it, but we tried to.
Did people seem to?
Some people did, others, you know, it's hard to tell because we would drive by Macy's parking lot and their sprinklers would just never shut off. We've made phone calls, we wrote letters, we've done everything we can up until, you know, enacting a fee or anything like that to get the people to abide by it. But, you know, we were on top of water conservation this year early. We sent out a letter early. We did Swift Reach. We put it on the website. We did as much as we could in the press just to push water conservation, but we can't make them do it. We can only ask them to. So it worked out, you know, some people, yes, they called and asked if I actually went personally to a couple people's houses, helped them set the clocks up for them because they're, you know, a couple of people have no clue. They don't want to have to pay their irrigation person to come do it. I voluntarily said, if you guys need somebody to go do it, I'll come to you. I'll help you out. I'll walk you through it. You know, so we had a handful of people do that. So water conservation was better than it has been in the past, for sure.
Did you do outreach to some of the irrigation companies?
Yeah, actually, when the pandemic went on, we had H2M actually had it. We had every week we did a meeting with all the water districts. I believe I sent you guys an email about this, and the Long Island Irrigation Association was on those meetings, and we explained to them. Multiple water districts said, "No, we work with us because our pumpage is going to be way up." They have association meetings where they brought this up about water conservation. They're pushing water conservation. They're not out there just to set the clocks and forget it. They, you know, they understand where we're coming from with water conservation and trying to let the water be there for the potable use, not for the, you know, the irrigation use. So they were a help too, and they wanted to work with the water districts also.
Great.
Some of the other, we did a bunch of changes in billing, including, I think, how we, those guys who hook up to our hydrants for, maybe they're landscapers or pool
Yeah,
companies, and, you know, they fill up the pools
Yep.
and things like that. We changed that, right?
Yes, that was changed. We only get maybe 2 permits or 3 permits a year, so
Okay.
we didn't see a drastic increase in that. But we did change the fee per truck and then per additional. So
Any other things that we changed, and just to find out how it worked out?
no, that was the 2 biggest things. The rate change, obviously, and that's the other thing about the rate change. We haven't really had any, if at all, complaints about the
We
rate
went
change.
up, what, 10% roughly, or 20%?
I think 20% overall.
20%.
Yeah, so we haven't had any issues with that. People have called, they said, you know, why is my bill higher? We explained to them why the bill's higher. And they said, okay, we just want to make sure we don't have a leak or anything. You know, they understand why.
Okay.
But yeah, the rate changes hasn't had little to no effect on, you know, consumers calling up and complaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they understand that this is a not-for-profit operation.
Yes, they understand that the money that.
Nobody's milking them.
No, they understand
If
that the
their
money
rate
that
goes
they're
up, it's-
paying,
right.
that they're paying is going back into the water district. It's not like we're collecting it and
Pocketing it.
and it's giving it to somebody else. They understand. Like we explained to them, you know, one of the topic of conversations is, well, you know, if Suffolk County came in, how does that correlate with us? And we can't give them an answer, but we just explained to them, listen, any money that you are paying towards the Hampton Bays Water District is going directly back into the Hampton Bays Water District. It's not going to a pool to help anybody else out. You're benefiting by the quality of water for the money that you're paying to
Right.
us. And they totally understand. They agree with it. They like it. They like the idea. So
And I know we've been, one of the added expenses is increased testing. We've increased
Yeah.
testing significantly.
yep.
Instead of doing it quarterly, we're testing monthly.
Well, yeah. Now we have to test quarterly for PFCs,
For
where it
PFC.
was twice a year, except for the main
Right,
plant.
but we're still in field 1, I think we're testing.
We're quarterly. Yeah, we're quarterly.
I thought we're
there.
doing it once a month there now,
When it's running.
when it's running.
Right. Yeah, because the field is temporary.
Is it off now, field 1?
No.
Still
We
on?
have to do a couple more samples at it before we can shut it off. We have the rest of the UCML4 that we had to test to
Right.
test it, then we can start shutting it down. But the demand has been up, so we've been using it. We haven't, usually by this time last year, we have, the 4 field's usually out and the main plant's usually out, but we've been utilizing it because we're still roughly 5 to 6 million gallons of water a day when
Sure.
we're
Still
used
a
to.
lot of people out here.
Yeah, and the weather's been nice. Just again, the COVID-19 has had little effect on us. Just some minor sampling changes, like we said in May. We sent out the letters notifying people we had to install that one sample station at the east side of the town that we utilize now instead of using a residence because they were fearful of the COVID-19, which is perfectly fine. So sampling has had, no hiccups with that with the COVID, and getting meter reads and stuff hasn't really had an effect. So we've been able to operate at full staff. Luckily, no infections, so everything's run well that way. If I don't want to go too much further, I'd rather break it down and let other people speak. But one thing we're looking into, which is still, is to be able to take the cost of the polluters, take it off of the ratepayers and put it towards the polluters. We've been a part of a couple webcasts now. This is a big thing that is coming down the pike that I'm sure we're involved in a lawsuit right now for the main plant, but we just try to explain to our customers that anything further that we have to do, we're trying to take the burden off of them and put it on the polluters. I guess this is going to be coming down the pike. I'm sure John could probably talk a little bit more about it, but we shouldn't have to burden the cost as ratepayers of what somebody else's mistake is, because this is not an actual occurring thing in our water table.
Right.
I'm talking about the PFCs. And this is also taking place with the 1,4-dioxane also, but right now we're just worried strictly about PFCs because that's all we have. We have non-detects of 1,4-dioxane, but the PFCs is what we really have to worry
Right.
about. So that's just a good PR to, explain to people that, we're not looking to bury your pockets with these costs. That is eventually, hopefully, all these costs, especially the carbon change out, which we have to discuss, will be able to be recouped through the polluters, so that the customers don't have to pay every 3 to 5 years for us to pay for the carbon change out.
Yeah, we have a lot of costs between design, engineering, construction, those GAC filters. Some of it was grants, but a lot of it wasn't.
Right.
Changing the carbon, all those things. We shouldn't have to, the ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for those.
No.
Any of that, when it's all was caused by the companies that, put this material out there on the market that, we believe they knew,
Right.
could get into drinking water. And so we have, obviously, we have litigation too, where it's, your litigation is our litigation.
Right.
Plus we have, another claim townwide that we're progressing. So hopefully there'll be some money that comes in that can then lower the rates again in the water district. That would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's just to help take the burden off.
Yeah.
And we talked about the pumpage, billing. I don't want to jump too far ahead, so if anybody's got anything else they want to add to what I
Yes,
said.
let's stay on that issue for a second on the PFOA, PFOS,
Yep.
perfluorinated, polyfluorinated compounds. The GAC filters we put in, we test the water going in, we test the water coming out. And so far, we're good. The water going in has got elevated levels, but the water coming out has non-detects
Yep.
for the most part.
No, it's non-detect, yes.
Yeah, but we're getting a little bit concerned about the carbon I guess there's a certain number of receptacles.
Yeah, it's coming saturated with the...
Yeah, there's only so many places that these compounds can get trapped.
So it's becoming saturated, and we're having breakthrough into our 75%. We have detection into our 75% in one of the vessels. That's why we want to bring up, we have to get that changed next year.
Okay.
We didn't put it in as a line item for a budget. We talked about this in May to come back to this meeting with John. It has all the specifics, so if he wants to come up and talk about the specifics of
Yeah, because I have
the
questions.
change out and how we're going to pay for it and where we should get the
Yeah,
money.
how much that costs, how you
Yeah.
do it, how
John.
long the wells are out. John, do you want, and I have some questions about the different types of carbon that get used. Some last longer, maybe cost more. There's like coconut carbon and different sources of carbon for those.
So at the one field, we have a coal-based anthracite carbon. Anthracite has proven to be a little bit more effective in removing the perfluorinateds. There is coconut's an option. It's a cheaper option. So as part of the bid that we're going to do, we're going to get quotes on both coconut and coal, and then we can, maybe it's worth, a quicker change out might be worth lesser capital costs now.
Okay, so you'll advise us on that.
Yep, we're going to get quotes on both.
Do you have a ballpark of what?
The carbon is about $2, maybe $2 to $2.25 a pound. We have 80,000 pounds, so you're looking at 160,000. And then the coconut is typically a little bit less, $1.75, $1.80 a pound. And, do the math on that is, you're probably talking in the 150 range. So,
John, is there a difference in longevity between the two types of carbon?
there is definitely, when we're talking about perfluorinated, everything we've seen so far, and again, data is very limited. Everything's telling us that the anthracitic carbon is lasting longer. for
Okay.
So we just have to run the numbers and see
Right.
where we come out ahead. Well, how long?
Is that a biochar? The anthracite,
Of what?
is it a biochar?
A biochar?
Yeah,
The anthracite?
yeah.
I'm not exactly 100% sure what you mean by biochar.
It's a product that's produced specifically for PFAS and PFOAs.
It's not. The anthracite carbon is also used in a lot of VOC removal, odor removal. It's kind of it's a jack of all trades of treatment. It does a lot. It softens water, it removes odor, it improves taste. It could remove chlorine.
Yeah, I mean, a whole range of.
Yeah, we're doing AOP systems now where we're injecting hydrogen peroxide in to remove contaminants, and it actually pulls the hydrogen peroxide out. So it does a lot. It's not specific to anything.
In your analysis, I'd like you to include how much PFOs and PFOAs they can take out. Dollar for dollar, how much are we getting with the carbon filters? And the longevity of the carbon as well. It may or may not be cheaper in the long run to use a more expensive product, right?
There is
But-
resins out there, ion exchange resins. They're out there. They've been they're kind of in their infancy, I should say. Resins have been known to last longer, but they're also a lot more expensive. I don't have the exact numbers on resins. I probably want to say $300 to $350 a square yard, and
Right.
I don't know how many square yards a carbon vessel is, but I could also look into that.
The most amount of PFOAs removed at the least price over time.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? The carbon media that we're using now, are we like compared to other wells that are going through the same thing, using it quicker or not as quick, or?
I got to tell you, you're one of the first to be using it solely for
Okay.
perfluorinated. More systems are coming online now.
So nothing to compare it with, really? I'm just
Not-
wondering, do we have a big amount of PFOAs going through there, and that's why it's running through the media quickly?
A lot of it is that on August 26th, they dropped the MCL,
Yep.
and it's 10 parts per trillion. Imagine with 10 parts per trillion, you have 0 time to react between a 1 and a 10. It could happen like that. Well, a VOC is 5 parts per billion. So you could see a 1 part per billion, and you have a lot of time to react. So,
That field is also pulling out, there's a certain amount of nitrate at that field too, from
There is.
fertilizer, or from maybe sewage from downtown. That takes up some of the space in that filter, I believe, too. It makes the carbon not last as long.
a little bit. With the nitrates, in the initial run, when you go into the clean carbon, it'll start pulling nitrates, but it reaches an equilibrium pretty quickly. So what's going in, what's coming out. If you overload the carbon, you do run the risk of sloughing off nitrates, yes.
So, just for the public's edification, the drop from 73 parts per trillion to 10 parts per trillion is a result of the governor of the state of New York's change, not an EPA change, but it's within the state of New York.
EPA hasn't regulated either contaminant. New York State has regulated them.
So we have a regulated chemical now that we didn't before. We had a recommendation with the EPA at 73 parts per trillion.
The 70 parts per trillion was
Roughly 70.
was a health advisory.
Yeah.
And it's based on,
So now we have and I'm just trying to
Now we
make
have
sure
a
the public
requirement.
understands that we have.
now you have an MCL, and it's
Yeah.
3. It's PFAS, PFOA, and 1,4-dioxane are all now regulated.
So we're burdened now with a requirement to do that, and that's one of the things we're talking about, and why we're talking about this.
Yes.
Yeah, well, when it was 70 parts per trillion, we were treating it as if it was a
Yeah,
requirement.
but it's become a maintenance
But we
issue
were
over the long
concerned-
term that we're gonna have to deal with.
We've been watching this pretty carefully, and we were concerned, even when it was close to 70, that, there were health impacts, and now they've changed it to 10, which is tough to meet, but we're doing it. Can I ask, on the swapping of the carbon, this is sort of the Julie's question, are we finding that we're burning through carbon faster than anticipated, or is it pretty much what we would expect the life of the carbon?
That's what I was getting at, yeah.
I think we burned through it a little quicker than we anticipated. I think initially we had thought 5 years, and this is 3.5 years.
But at that time, you were thinking of the 70,
70, and
right?
our levels in 1.3 have really risen high. They're in the triple digits now. While when we built this thing, it was 40s and 50. I'm sorry, 70s and 80s. Now we're up in almost double that. So we're having a lot more loading on the carbon than we did. So that
Coming into the filter.
coming into the
Right.
filter. So that plays a
From
factor.
1.3, you say?
Yeah, well, 1.3.
1.3, yeah. That's taken a big hit,
And
and
we pretty much have to run that one for volume?
that's our good one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one doesn't have the manganese that 1.2 has, so.
Yeah, it's one of our largest producing wells in that field.
Now, is there like any backwashing that occurs with these things? Can you get more life out of it by, reversing the water flow?
You may be able to, two things could happen if you backwash the bed, because basically you're just lifting the bed and spinning it up. You could possibly get more life, but you're not going to extend the bed so far to get through a whole nother pumping season, or you could possibly mix up the bed to the point where,
So that's not part of the routine operation, is backwashing these filters?
no, we will backwash the filters when we load new resin.
When you load new
Yeah.
material?
Yep. Do they
Okay.
backwash it on startup every
When
year?
we start up, we do backwash.
Yeah.
Oh, in the beginning of the year?
Yeah,
Yep.
because the vessels are emptied for winter, so we have to fill and backwash the media out from it sitting over the winter time.
Where does that wastewater go? Does this recharge back?
There's a blow-up pit that was installed where that goes back down.
But then we're not repumping that same water, right?
No,
Okay,
It's downstream,
it's downstream,
yes.
okay.
But it's still re-entering the
We're still entering the water table, yeah.
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 And as I understand it, this carbon, if it continues to be used, at some point, it will release the PFOs and PFOAs if it's not changed out.
Yes, sir. It'll get to the
And-
point where the first thing we'll
It'll
see is just breakthrough.
Uh-huh.
So you'll see minor breakthrough in, the 10 parts, the 20 parts range. But if you just continue to load it and load it and load it, yes, then you'll see actually higher levels on the out effluent than the influent.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting,
Now we
because I
don't
know,
wanna-
We're monitoring that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's
okay.
why we're having
We're not
this
even close,
conversation.
yeah, okay. good.
As of yesterday, we monitored, we had a sample on the outflow side, and it was non-detect for manganese and for PFO for manganese and iron,
Good.
PFO.
All right.
and stuff.
But I think John said they were at like the 75%
And the
level.
75, I don't know the numbers
So
exactly.
if you're
but
driving your car, you're down to your last 25% of gas, so we got to do something relatively soon to avoid the situation that,
well, you have an
You're
increase
talking
in
about-
concentration, too.
Yeah, but
right?
once we start, in order to change the carbon, you need to take the plant offline. So they come and they remove the old and they dispose of that and they bring in the new. But once they bring in the new, there is a backwashing, running through it just to kind of condition the carbon. And then there's a series of water quality samples we have to do. So we're offline for probably, at a minimum, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. So we could run this to exhaustion, but that exhaustion could happen on July 4th, and then we're 3 weeks out, so.
I am not suggesting that.
Yeah. It's
And
just-
can
one of
this
the
be
reasons-
done in the off-season?
Yes.
Okay.
so you're trying to get this done this off-season, is that the point?
We're gonna bid it in January, and hopefully get it done in March.
Okay.
So a question on that, Councilwoman Lofton and I visited the Suffolk County Water Authority lab when they were talking about coconut-based carbon products, and at the time, they were sort of expressed the same kind of thing that you did. They weren't entirely sure, or entirely happy, I guess, for lack of a better term, with the performance over time versus some other products that they had mentioned. And it's an interesting subject to me, because this change now from, it becoming a regulated chemical, are you talking with Suffolk County Water Authority on what they're doing relative to their filtration and
I know
changes
Joe
to
at
that?
the Water Authority pretty well, and they've been sticking to mainly the Filtrazorb 300, which is the anthracite, and the coconut-based. They're heavy into coconut-based because it's very good at removing volatiles. There is an enhanced anthracitic carbon that's different than the Filtrazorb that they say gets more removal. It just hasn't been proven.
Over.
So it costs a little bit more money, it removes a little bit more, but it also hasn't been proven. So on this one, we were thinking, let's go with the proven until somebody tells us that something else is proven and better.
No, it's good logic.
Are we gonna, I saw there was a low-level detect at field 3
Of,
was it PFOA or PFOS?
well, there was a large detect at field 3, and then a low-level detect.
Right, and that was that was one of the wells.
3-3.
3-3, and that's turned off now.
3-3, what happened is at the beginning of the season, or July, we took a sample and it was non-detect. In September, we took a sample and it was 40 parts. Immediately turned it off and resampled. And the resample came back and it was 1.9, which is virtually non-detect. So we took another sample to get more confirming samples.
So what, the latest sample is below 2?
Yes.
So the well is operating again?
Nope.
It's still
Can't
on.
operate it. Since there's an MCL, since we have a 40 parts per trillion recorded, if we now operate the well, we're subject to an MCL, which we don't want. So now we have to do confirming samples to see where we really are at, and then
So you have to operate the well to get the samples,
to waste.
but all right,
To
to
waste,
waste.
yes. So now there's something called a deferral that you can submit to New York State. And if we submit a deferral, we got to tell them that, A, we're going to treat this thing with carbon, we're going to treat this thing with blending, or we think the 40 was an anomaly, and we're not going to treat it at all. And then they'll come back and they'll comment on that.
So what's our approach here?
Well, 3.2 definitely has perfluorinateds in it, but not over 10 parts. It's maybe half.
3-2.
3.2.
Did you say 3-3 was the problem?
3.3 was the problem, yes.
So 3-3 is off right now.
Yep.
When are we retesting that?
It's in the lab, right? Yeah.
Oh, you just retested it?
Yeah, just waiting for
So we're waiting for results.
So, yeah, they have a requirement, right? You have to test over a certain regimen before they'll say.
So we have-
finding out.
We have 3 sets of tests on 3.3. It goes from non-detect, less than 2, to 40, back to less than 2. So we took another one to see where that falls.
So this will be the 4th one.
Yes.
And
We're
if,
trying to generate an average as low as possible.
could that anomaly have been just a laboratory issue,
I don't know.
incorrect test?
It could be maybe, or
When
it
you're
could
dealing
be
with parts
that,
per trillion, it's,
it could be there's a little plume emanating from somewhere that it just gets sucked in when 3.3 is running and maybe 3.2 is not, or when they're both running, or
right.
when the moon is
So
full.
we're keeping close tabs on this. You're going to report back to us.
Yep.
If we had to do a GAC filter, those things are very expensive, obviously.
We saw that at one, yes. And this one, we would have to put in a building because we couldn't sacrifice the 1 field and the 3 fields during the winter.
Right.
We would look to put it in a belt, maybe setting them down a little bit, building a metal building around it so they can operate through the winter.
Year-round, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping we don't have to do another GAC filter, so let's just follow it.
At this point right now, if it was all to stand the way we were to stand right now, the state would look at that 40 parts, that lab report, as real. They wouldn't
But it was,
disregard.
if it's not replicated, it was one test that they couldn't, when, in retesting, it didn't show anything.
It didn't, and we're hoping that they agree with that.
Okay.
They also may err on the side of precaution and say, well, it was there once, it might come back, so.
Right. And certainly in the blending, the water that went into the system was well below the threshold.
Yes. Yeah. Because 3.1 is non-detect for everything, so, and they're all the same rate. But 3.2 does have PFAS, so it's just, it's below the detection limit. It's below the MCL.
10. It's below 10 parts per trillion.
Yes.
All right, but obviously we have to keep track of that, though. The fact that it's detectable, so are we're on quarterly sampling there?
Yes, we got moved, we're speaking with Jason Hine, we got moved to, instead of twice a year, we do quarterly sample. Well, now all wells gotta be tested
Yeah.
quarterly.
And part of the
This was put
MCL.
on right away, quarterly sampling. And he believes that if these samples come back, it's not in stone, that we can do what's called an interlock 3-3 out, that it won't come on first, it'll come on last, no. Last on, first off.
I can hear you fine, I just know the CTV viewers cannot hear you
Yeah,
at all. So if,
Once we had this detect back in May or June, I believe, we contacted the Board of Health Services, and they said that the levels weren't high enough for them to start an investigation. So then we let it ride throughout the demand season, and obviously we got to 40. Contacted Jason Heim right away. He's the, I forget his technical term, New York Health, Board of Health Services, and
Suffolk County, right?
Suffolk County. And he advised us that we locked the well out, and we notified him, so we were not in any sort of an MCL or out of compliance. Boarding these next couple of samples, if it comes back where that we can get a blended sample, where that means that all 3 wells are running, not going to system, we can shut it off going to system, do it out of a hydrant, and it's below the MCL, we can do a deferral, like what John was speaking on, to allow that to be approved for us to run the wells through the summertime, as long as it's a blended situation that, you know, whatever they want us to do, where 3-3s, last on, first off, and so forth, and then keeping up with the quarterly sampling. So it's all going to be dependent on this sample, how it comes back. I have sent over pumpage data to them regarding when this well was running. Was it in lead, was it in lag, or was it in mid? And the pumping data doesn't correspond with the high level. So if something happened, whether it was, we were saying it's an anomaly, something happened with the lab, something fell in the sample bottle, we don't know what happened. But the only thing we can do is hope that these confirming samples come back the same.
okay, thank you. John, I want to ask you about some of the other capital projects, if I may. So we got a number of things that are
Yep.
going on at the moment. We've got the iron manganese filtration.
The iron and manganese filtration was bid. We have low bidders. We have signed contracts for 2 of the 3 contracts. In fact, the plumbing contractor dropped his pipe on site today. The electrical contractor has been given his notice to proceed, and we're working on submittals with him. And
This is
then
Field 4.
Field 4. And the G contractor, who is responsible for the clearing and building, he never received his contract. I saw an email from the town forwarding his contract again today, so
Okay.
we'll stay on top of
So
him.
when do we expect that work to begin?
I'll stay on top of that. I'm hoping next week that we have a pre-construction meeting.
Okay.
Early next week, that we have all the contractors on site to discuss it.
And that, how long is that project going to take?
I think it's a 9-month project, so
So Field 4 will be offline?
for the duration, yep.
9 months, you said?
Yeah,
9 months?
yep.
November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July?
Yes. Yep, so we're behind the gun already on this one because of the start date.
Are we going to have an issue with lack
We
of
may have to
time?
make provisions where we have, there was wells available and ready to run to system without the iron plant operating.
I don't want to get into the situation we were in 2 years ago where we just didn't have enough water.
No, we already know, so we'll have the electric up and running. That shouldn't be a problem. It's gonna be, we may have to come by next March and analyze where we are, and we might have to make provisions to get that wells running to system, whether that be, through a little extra work and a little extra time, a little some.
Without the filtration, yeah.
Without the filtration. It might be a little extra piping or a little extra, a valve here or there, or it might be some extra electrical work that we need to do to run
Yeah.
those systems without the iron. But, yeah, we're cutting it close, and, yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, and I've been through this once. I don't want to.
I don't wanna go through it
Go
again.
through it again. So let's not, let's stay on top of it
Yep.
so we don't end up in that situation, even if we have to halt construction for the summer of the filters and run it the way it currently is, the system. It's actually did pretty well this summer, that field, I think.
We still have iron problems. It'd be nice to get
It
that
was
filtration.
below, though, the 1 milligram per liter, though, right? The combined iron manganese,
It was hovering right at that one.
right around
Yeah.
that point.
But it'd be nice to get that filtration in and have non-detect coming out of that site. I think the people on that side of town.
Yeah, no, I want to get it done, but at the same time, I want people to have decent water pressure.
We'll work with the contractors, and, we're gonna proceed as is, and, with the intent of doing it, but we'll keep a sharp eye on it, and if we have to, I could warn you that if we have to make other means, we'll have to have them, run a little bit additional pipe or put a little electrical in, just so we can go to system.
Let me briefly.
John,
Yeah, go ahead.
excuse me. Would this mean that water would be flowing in the opposite direction that it's currently flowing? And from what I understand, that was one of the problems with the discolored water throughout the water district. If this field goes down, will we have to flush water a different way?
No, I think that field is so extreme, and the tank will be up and running by then, so you'll always have the water leaving that field.
Right.
But
My
you'll-
sense is that whatever's on the pipes is probably no longer on the pipes, but on the inside.
Yeah, But what we
so-
need to do is, we need to make sure that by, Memorial Day next year, that these two wells are available for
Yeah,
us,
it's
as
a
well as the
good
tank.
question.
Okay, good. And I appreciate the contingency considerations as well.
So we'll have to look at this
ask
in
you
February, March, and say, okay, we need to add a valve, we need to
Sometimes I
do
know
this.
county contracts, they
Might-
build in
It
incentives.
might be a
to
change
get
order,
things done.
but we have to look at it, so, just to make sure we have the wells available.
Could you repeat that, please?
So come February or March, we'll look at it and say, we need to add a valve, we need to add piping, or we need to do something to make sure that we can pump these wells to system. So I'm not saying that's not what, that could be a change order in the future. We'll have to evaluate that, but, we'll have to do what we have to do to get those wells to system.
Okay, thank you.
So, John, I've got a question on the contract itself. Are there performance guarantees embedded in this contract?
There is, but
County?
it's 9 months.
So when we talked originally, I thought it was less than 9 months. That's why I'm a little surprised to hear that. Maybe I heard it
No,
wrong.
I mean,
9 months to what? Because I got into this issue a little bit with you with the GAC filters. 9 months to be online, or 9 months for the construction to be finished,
to be online.
to be operating,
Online, yep. Operating.
tested, up and running,
Done.
Are there incentives contained in the contract?
There's no incentive.
or disincentives.
Or
There are
incentives to finish it sooner?
There are liquidated damages in the contract, yes.
Okay.
So if they're not finished by a certain date, there's costs associated for them
Per day, yes.
per day, penalty.
Yes.
And to be clear, we're talking done. Trucks are
Operational.
gone, everything's gone,
9
everything's
months
running,
oper-
it's beautiful.
9 months
9
is
months.
operational.
Okay.
There's another period after that, they're allowed to go back and do restoration, punch list stuff, so on and so forth.
And what's, if,
Okay.
for each day over 9 months,
I have to remind myself, it's a standard town contract. so-
hopefully it's significant enough to serve as a disincentive.
And there are definitions for punch list stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Because that could be a lot of, all right.
All right, continuing, and we can come back to any questions on any of these capital projects, but I want to hit a couple more. Bellows Pond Water Tower, one of our 3 towers.
They're out there now, they've mobilized, I think they're welding, they're continuing.
Just to refresh everybody's memory, we're resurfacing, recoding the entire
So-
tower, power blasting it, whatever. Okay, repainting.
In
Okay.
progress, as we speak, they're welding their containment on, so in the next week or so. As you drive through Hampton Bays, you're going to notice a big
Tent?
covering on the tank. And that means they're working underneath it. It's containment, so when they blast paint or the blast material doesn't get in the air and blow all over town. So
Okay.
you'll notice that containment going up.
So that water tower is already offline,
Yes, sir.
and let's get in sort of the same types of questions. How long is this gonna take?
We already predicted that they're going to do a certain portion, put the tank online, and then come back and finish after the summer. So it's going to be an inside-outside thing.
Okay. All right, so it's not gonna, because we're gonna obviously need that tank to get through the summer.
Mhm.
That would be devastating without it.
Mhm.
So that's not gonna be an issue then.
Nope. Well, if it's even close, we'll tell them to leave site, and it's in the contract already that they'll have to leave site and come back.
So what, are they doing the outside first or the inside first?
They're doing the outside first.
Okay.
And summer doesn't really mean summer anymore. I just think we all need
No,
to keep
it's
that in mind, too.
Summer started in May.
Summer starts May 15th, we call it. That's when people like to turn on the irrigation, so that's when summer starts.
The delamination that's been occurring is on the inside though
Yes.
primarily, right?
Mhm.
I just, when we get to that, I just want to make sure that our construction oversight team makes, really sure that the surfaces are prepped correctly. That whatever, there's no surface rust, whatever it is, that the adhesive or whatever the primer is done right, because this should not have delaminated so quickly. It was, obviously, there was issues with the workmanship that was done initially, and, I don't want the same mistake repeated here.
No.
So
yeah,
I want an expert to go in there and say, yes, these guys are doing it right, that the surface is adequately prepped for this, for the epoxy that goes onto it, so.
So there's two people handling that job. One is a fellow named Arthur SHT. Arthur is actually from Louisiana. He has cut his teeth on coatings of oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. So he's used to everything that we have here as far as an environmental. He has all his NACE certifications for coatings. He knows more about what I call paint and he calls coatings in his pinky than, I know everything. So he is running that. He is one of the toughest guys I've ever seen on contractors.
Okay, and he's working for us, right?
He's working for us. And then
Okay.
there's another guy, Victor, out there, who's also a NACE certified inspector. And he is cut from the, he's, whatever the terminology is, he comes from Arthur's regime, so.
Same cloth, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Good, and the same thing for the outside as well, because the paint, we know is failing on the outside, the chalky paint.
Yep.
Okay, 'cause
There's no doubt in my.
that's gotta be taken
I have
down to the-
the right two guys on this site.
Okay.
Did the cable get fixed, the guideline?
That will be fixed.
That will be fixed for the safety of the people going up the ladder, okay.
It will be fixed before they go up the ladder.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I guess somebody has to go up there.
The first guy up. yeah.
First guy. But after the first guy,
Yeah, when they climb those ladders, they're tied off on two different points anyway. So that safety is there, but they're also tied off to the tank. So if the safety was to fall, they're still tied to the tank.
So let's go to one more capital project, which is actually two capital projects potentially, the what I'm talking about. So we're under sort of a ticking clock with the Shinnecock Bay crossing pipe. The state and county are telling us we have to move away from that pipe that goes sort of a couple feet above the bay bottom there.
Yep.
That we've had two breaks in now. And so I think we hired your firm to do an analysis and on directional drilling it.
Yep.
And then I think we also are looking at one mobilization and doing directional drilling under Shinnecock Canal,
Yes, sir.
which we've been told by D&B will likely solve the pressure problems east of the canal and provide some redundancy.
It'll help a lot.
Yeah, so that's all good. What's the status of that?
Our survey crew and we actually hired a sub to do our wetlands delineations and get us through the DEC. They should be mobilizing out there next week to mark the wetlands, and they're also going to do soundings across the bay and the canal, just to verify where the bottom of the canal is and where the bottom of the bay is. So they go and they do soundings, they stake their wetlands, they stake their titles, and then we pick up a survey so we have a smooth profile of exactly what's out there. That way nothing surprising comes up with us. And then when we actually drill, we know how deep we have to go. So we know about.
Permitting is the tougher part in engineering, right? Once you have everything in place, the actual directional drilling is pretty quick.
Yeah, the DEC, since we're directional drilling, I'm not expecting a lot of pushback from the DEC. Army Corps can be difficult sometimes, and then Department of State usually is, goes in line with the DEC. I think then there's also a town council that we have to go to too.
You have a team at H2M that does this fairly often, right? So you have good people on this as well?
We've actually hired a fellow named William Bowman, Land Use Technologies. He's either out of Hampton Bays or Southampton. He lives down here, but he has a company that just specializes in getting those permits. And we found that if we use him, we get them faster.
Okay,
So he's our subcontractor, consultant.
okay.
So
So that's all going okay?
that's all moving along right now, yep.
So you think we're on target to be able to replace the pipe under Shinnecock Bay, on the bottom of Shinnecock Bay, within that 2-year window?
Yeah, it's provided that we don't get surprises on the environmental end. There's a little coordination we have to do with the county because they own, does the county own the beach parking lot down there? Or is the town?
The water park?
I think we own it now.
Yeah, the town owns.
The town owns?
Yes.
Even easier.
Yeah, so we'll be okay there. I don't know who owns, I think.
No, I'm talking about on the
North
canal side.
Oh, on the canal side, yeah, the county owns,
Michonne is county.
Yeah, so we'll have to do some coordination with the
yeah.
county.
And Canal Road is also, so just where the parks office is, the road between there and the canal is also county. And the bulkhead itself is owned by the county.
Okay.
So you sort of have the county on both sides.
Mhm.
But they should be cooperative.
I would imagine they would be.
All right, but now we have not put the money in place only for the engineering piece.
Yes, sir.
So at some point, we'll have to do a
Make
bond.
decision, yep.
This is not inexpensive, but, okay. Any other capital projects that we have ongoing? I think that's it, right? Those are the big ones.
Yeah, the two, we applied for 2 for next year, this minor ones, this way everybody knows. We're gonna do a leak detection survey, which we haven't done in, I don't know, ever. We have to do it, especially for the DEC, if we ever go for a future well. And it's also good for water conservation to show that we actually are looking into a detection on the mains if there's any unforeseen leaks that we haven't surfaced yet. And then we're gonna do tank washing. We're gonna wash the one at the main plant and Field.
Did we ever, and it's maybe a question for John, I don't know, but you might have the answer, James. When we had that lateral sort of split in the water main, maybe by Shinnecock Road, back in there.
The one on Springville, yeah.
Springville Road, thank you. We had talked maybe about sending the metal off for analysis. It looked really good, but I had a concern that some of the ferrous may have been pulled out because of the water chemistry, and that the pipe was more brittle than it ought to be. But we were hoping that maybe a piece of that metal, I looked at the pipe, it looked like it sort of shattered from that, hammer effect that, Rich spoke of in the past. But I just wondered whether it, should have had more elasticity, and that it could be a sign of a larger problem, that maybe we should get that metal tested. I could be completely wrong on this, but
John came out and he gave his professional opinion to look at it and state.
did we ever send it
We did not send it out to
off
get
for analysis?
No, I looked at it and then I showed it to some people in the industry. And everything I saw on that pipe was how it split was 100% a water hammer issue.
Okay.
If you read the textbooks on pipe splitting and water hammer, especially larger pipe, 10-inch and 12-inch, they always split just like that. That coupled with the ground down there is not solid ground, it's boggier. So you don't have, when you do get that water hammer, there's nothing blocking that pipe in place. And
Okay.
where it was coming up a hill. So in essence, that water hammer is sending that pipe into the bog and,
So we haven't seen any others like that since?
No.
You know, I had read a little bit too around that time that happened, and iron ductile pipe of that generation often has like an iron and graphite matrix that it's composed of, and if the pH is low, you can pull some of the ferrous component out, leaving it, you know what graphite is, like lead from a pencil. It can become very brittle.
yep,
Snap easily. So that, that was a concern, that it could look perfect, but could actually be quite brittle because the iron's pulled out.
yeah.
And we did have discolored water for a long time, which that could have been a source of some of the discoloration, that iron component. And so it's sort of trying to connect the dots. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing something there that could.
No, I don't believe so.
Particularly since, having to replace water mains would be costly
Yeah,
if they are aging out. A water main could easily go 100 years, even more, 150 years. But if this effect happens, you could actually shorten the lifespan substantially. So,
now luckily, we've been correcting pH since 1984, so we've had a good almost 30 years of pH above a 7, so a relatively neutral, if not leaning on against acidic. So we've been doing that for a while, and like I said, but there's no other pipe breaks down there, and then looking at where it broke and the type of break, I think it's what is expected on a water hammer. It's just now
Okay.
determining what caused that water hammer.
I
is a
trust
whole
you.
Other issue.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an acid reduction test, so it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's just a measurement of how much ferrites come out of the materials. That's it. So, all right.
I would say if we start to see more frequent shatters like this, then we ought to take a piece of the metal and just send it in for analysis,
Yes, sir.
all right? Yeah, we had talked about doing some kind of pipe strength, pipe integrity analysis using, I guess, sonar, or they do something, they send a sonic wave into the, through the water column, and they can detect the strength of the pipe. You know what I'm talking about? There's a technique.
Yeah.
I think I read about it. I've never, firsthand knowledge, I've never seen it done. I've never.
John, do you know what I'm talking about?
We used it underwater quite a lot to
Okay.
do pipe testing, strength testing. It's sends out a signal, it's a square wave,
Now something
sign.
goes in the pipe and,
Yeah, and the reverberation gives you a picture. And it tells you relative strength.
But,
It's used a lot in outflow pipes in particular.
It seems like we're okay right now. It seems like that was how many water main breaks are we seeing a year?
Half a dozen.
Half a dozen?
We had two that were caused, the one that was on Newtown Road, the big one that we had was caused by somebody hooking up illegally to the hydrant. And we had this one on Springville.
Yeah, those are both those hammer effects.
Yeah, and then we've had it, all the other ones are service line leaks. People have old service lines that leak at the core of our connection. We dig up and we just put a new piece of pipe in. So it hasn't been significant water main breaks.
So these hammer effects are caused when basically often at hydrants, right? Or
Right, they'll drop it on
at
right
valves
off.
where they shut the valve off quickly, right? Or
It's a lot of force.
who is allowed to touch these valves, and are we educating them so that, because this gets really expensive if they don't know what they're doing? Maybe this is a question for Rich, but,
The valves yeah.
I just don't want to see the same thing happen over and over again, because one company isn't.
Yeah, we've had a situation where we've had a few people illegally operating the hydrants, and that's what I believe this situation was, where, it's hard to monitor 528 hydrants, I think, or 546 hydrants that people have on the back roads and side roads. They have the ability to hook up to a hydrant in a relatively short amount of time, fill their vehicle up or their vessel up, and exit the scene before they're even, before they're seen. And as far as I know, the break on Newtown Road, that was another illegal operation where they were using the hydrant to fill cesspools up to test for leaks.
When you say illegal, I mean, do we
They didn't
file
have
a police report, or-
Yeah, well, we had
Is
filed
it-
the police report and stuff, and ultimately, they ultimately wound up paying for that whole.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, they
So
paid.
we are
yeah.
holding them
Yeah,
responsible?
no, they're all squared up. They had paid up, I believe it was almost $15,000 worth of damage.
Yeah, actually, it was 19.
$19,000 they actually came and made good on it. They did pay for their mistakes. But it was an illegal operation where they had hooked up to a hydrant. They had permits to use a hydrant in the area. They hooked up to the wrong hydrant, and they had a 2.5-inch line stretched across Newtown Road that was being run over by vehicles. So every time a vehicle runs over that line, and I mean, you're shutting it off faster than, that was that.
So they're bonded, right? Whoever you allow to do that, you require them to.
They're the guys that got, like, people that obtain a license legally, a hydrant permit, which again, we only have a couple of companies, three or
Right,
so
right.
that are steady. Those people are in the business of using the hydrants, on a continual basis. And I believe they have the common sense to, most of them do. This operation on Newtown Road.
But you don't have a requirement for them to be, I'm just asking.
Oh, as far as like a training or anything?
No, that they're bonded to pay
Yeah,
for.
no.
Insured, yeah, I'm sure they have insurance.
Yeah, they have insurances and things.
Yeah, okay, but because it can be extremely expensive.
Oh, yeah, of course it can.
If we're crossing roads, they probably should have those
They
little
should have,
ramps,
yeah,
too.
they
I
shouldn't have
mean,
even been using that hydrant.
I know the
Again,
fire
they didn't have
department-
permits, but yeah, of course, if they had even put something over the hose to prevent the hose from being collapsed every time a vehicle ran over it.
And then it's
know,
a traffic issue as well.
Yeah,
Somebody
it's
hits that at
hard
a
to
high
say
speed.
whether,
Okay, Rich.
in that particular situation, it was hard to say whether they actually opened the hydrant too quickly, and that was the cause of it, or the vehicles running over it. It was only open for a short amount of time, and being the volume of water that was being used down there, it caused the damage.
They should be required to use those.
Yeah. of
And
course.
with traffic
Yeah,
precautions.
They're not even supposed to use, they're supposed to
Flag
use a
person.
gate valve and not a ball valve. A ball valve is a quarter turn, a gate
Slam
valve,
it
you have
shut.
to physically
I get it.
screw it down. That, in answer also to the piece of main that you looked at behind the shop, that was a lateral crack in that main. And when you saw it, the pieces that are missing from it, take into consideration that main was also picked up by an excavator on scene and dropped on the road several times. So that main, not only was it able to, how'd you put it? It had a crack in it from a water hammer, but it was actually able to survive, I'd have to say, a 15-foot drop onto pavement without any additional, well, I'd have to say there was additional damage to the main, but a 300-pound chunk of water main falling from 15 feet in the air onto solid pavement generates a lot of force.
Right.
And I would have to say that the damage to the main from that fall was minimal. Therefore, just my indication of a field observation like that would say that structurally, that main is
That
in
was
good shape.
strong, yeah.
Despite the crack from the water hammer, which
Right.
forces it generated.
I mean, I looked at it.
Yeah, yeah.
I hit it with a piece of metal. It sounded.
And again, yeah.
It didn't
it's-
sound like a bell. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
tight. It sounded like a piece of wood. I was hitting a piece of wood.
I myself, in my experiences on the job, pulling that piece of water main was actually in groundwater in the bog. So there's nothing but soupy sand around that main to keep it in place. Like John had stated, there was no solid
Nothing
around
holding
that,
it.
yeah, to hold it into place. So that main was allowed to, over time, even as the tide rises and settles there, that main is constantly, since it's been put in the ground, it's been flexing. And it lasted all of these years. I believe those mains.
Listen, these things happen.
50, yeah, it
I
happens.
just, my thinking was, maybe this is a sign of something that
Yeah.
we could catch early.
Yeah,
And it sounds like it's not. It sounds like it's just a typical thing.
I myself,
Great.
yeah, I myself had just, I'd seen, just to give you some confidence, you sleep a little easier, that it just, in my opinion, it wasn't nothing really out of the norm.
Okay, that's, well, that's why you're there.
Trying to do our best.
you know, you have years of expertise here,
We're trying to
so,
do our best.
in the trenches, literally, in this case.
Still out there.
Yeah.
You know, we're still out there. Also, in answer to the questions of as far as rust complaints and things like that, I myself had actually just answered yesterday for several hours. I was with people that have a filtration system installed in their house, and I believe that the cause of their water issues inside the house, being that it's an isolated incident, was actually the filter systems that they had put in. It was one of these, I honestly, I don't even want to mention the name of the company, but a lot of these systems were installed, these carbon filters, in houses when you know, when we had our issues, and there was a lot of companies coming around that were selling these systems that simply just do not work. And this was another case where that's my determination that it was a filter inside the house. We did tests outside of the house, both on our water main from a hydrant. We also did tests in the house from their service line on raw water. And our iron test in the field produced non-detect levels of both iron and manganese, with chlorine residuals, pH residuals, and polyphosphate residuals being also within standards. Actually, they were right on the money. I believe the pH was a 7.6. Poly numbers were a 0.60, which, as far as our numbers go, which has actually never really been clarified, we were always told to pump at a level somewhere around 1.2 parts per million, but we found that that was causing white deposits inside of people's hot water heaters when you're pumping it at that level. So we reduced the levels ourselves, and we seem to have negated a lot of those problems.
Good. We're using less sequestering.
Yes, yeah, we're using less sequestering agent. You know, I don't think, you know, there's a lot of pool companies and water companies, and this particular filtration company that had sold these people their filtration system was claiming that our water around here was extremely high in nitrates and like really with numbers that were off the charts, which simply wasn't true.
Yeah, remember that.
Yeah, we had issued advisories about people and these companies that were coming around selling water filters. and
Scaring
stuff like
people,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, and it just simply wasn't true. This particular company, these people had been having these issues. This company came in and they actually used pool test strips.
Right, yeah, it's
And
not
they,
accurate.
you know, they came in and they put the scare into these people, and they actually, they called us, and we went down there and went through the barrage of tests. Ultimately, coming in, my conclusion was that it's a filter problem. So we've been very good.
Well, thank you for that. I want to try to wrap this up. I did actually have a question that's more for executive session related to private wells in the area.
Sure.
Is there any more questions or open session?
Two things. One, a comment about Waterhammer. I just want everyone to know that in the fire department, at the fire academy, and the chiefs, as you know, definitely train the members, the men and women of the fire department, to open up the hydrants slowly.
It's very
No matter what's, right,
Please.
close them slowly. So,
Please.
you know, hydrants are in fact for the fire department and fire suppression. And it would seem appropriate to have another meeting before our next meeting. We have a biannual. I think we're scheduled for April of next year. I don't know how do the commissioners feel about this. You know, maybe sometime in January we could have the management of the water authority to come back for another meeting.
We could. I've also, you know, we've talked about have them doing a community meeting. We did one, remember?
Yeah, we did two, but then COVID happened, so we.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's a good idea too, that they have a meeting within the community, just so everybody can ask questions of the water district.
There's
But if you'd like to see, you know, another update, a more frequent update,
Well, with the capital projects that are beginning, and, you know, I think an update would be.
And the time-sensitive
Sure.
project
Yeah,
that we
absolutely.
shoot for
And, you know,
February
I'm
or-
all in favor of that now that we've actually
Okay.
started the Forefield project, and if we have anybody shows up from the public, we have
particularly with those concerns about time sensitivity and,
Yeah, and I would agree January is probably better than February,
Absolutely.
particularly, you know,
It would be a
hearing
mid-progress
from you
report, sort
in
of.
particular.
Can we do
on
late
that
January?
subject.
later January?
Sure. Just,
All right.
I mean, you have to have time enough to react, to make changes if
January
we're going to be able.
Janice, you can set that up,
What
right?
would be part of the organizational meeting resolution?
Before I step down, I just wanted to let everybody know here on the board also that this year, for the first year, we're flushing twice this year. As opposed, we're starting our flushing program
Good.
November 15th of this year for 1 week. And we're also going to flush in the spring, possibly one more time.
Can you just make sure that the residents know? So
Yes, sir.
they're
It's
gonna-
already,
They're
yeah.
gonna see some discolored water as a result of that, but they'll understand it if they're told in advance that you'll be doing some routine flushing, and they may experience some discolored water.
We discussed it in the past, the flushing programs that we've initiated, and our flushing seems to have done a pretty good job as far, keeping the system clean. And so we're going to do it twice.
Is there a way to, I know you probably use text messaging and things like that, is there, maybe letters?
Yeah, we send out letters.
Is there a way to put like a?
Swift reach.
You have a little digital sign that you can put out on the street saying flushing in this area this week, you may
But
experience.
for the most part, when we do flushing, there are a certain amount of customers that we actually personally notify when we're in an area. There's people that have medical issues and stuff like that. But we have been, it goes out on the radio, it goes out in print, and it goes out on a Swift reach.
I know our
bulletin.
police have those signs for
Yeah,
special
they-
events,
yeah.
and there's probably not a whole heck of a lot of special events happening right
Yeah.
now, so maybe we could,
That's actually
Sort of like-
roadside, yeah. if we
That's
The
a
could-
main
great
highways leading
if we
into
could
those
get-
areas.
Yeah, if we could get something like that,
Idea.
that wouldn't be a,
Who's the liaison?
put in the old diner
You
park.
liaison to Water District?
Yes.
Or You want to see if you can
Yeah.
coordinate with the chief, police chief?
Yeah, that'd be great, absolutely, I'm all for it.
All right, anything else? I think what I'd like to do then is to just do a very brief executive session with you guys, which would mean that we'd adjourn this meeting, go into executive session for maybe, I don't think I'll need more than 10 minutes, and then we'll come back, and we'll do the special meeting, which was scheduled for 11. I know we have some people in the back talking to John right now, so let me make, is everybody okay with that? Okay, so,
I'm going to go back downstairs.
So-
you need to go home.
Councilman Bouvier, just, we're gonna do only, I don't think more than 10-minute executive session. All right, so we'll have to clear the room out, but,
Yeah, we have some members of the Sustainability Committee, I was just letting them know that we were going to be doing that, so.
okay, and, I think that we'll get into, we'll be back for the special meeting, I think in about 10 minutes, so we should get that maybe by 11:35. And then, are they, the sustainability folks here for the main work session?
No,
Well,
they're
for the
actually
special
here,
meeting.
we're presenting a memorializing resolution on the draft agenda, and they wanted to speak.
Oh, right, okay. So you
But
told them
it's-
another 10 minutes?
I told them that's fine, we'll just go move ahead. I don't want them to sit there for an hour or more.
Okay, all right, so let me make a motion then to adjourn the meeting of the Hampton Bays Water District Commissioners, but to go into executive session, just very briefly to discuss some issues regarding private wells in the area. All right? Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.